وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد
الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم جنات النعيم خالدين فيها وعد الله حقا وهو العزيز الحكيم. خلق السماوات بغير عمد ترونها وألقى في الأرض رواسي أن تميد بكم وبث فيها من كل دابة وأنزلنا من السماء ماء فأنبتنا فيها من كل زوج كريم. هذا خلق الله فأروني ماذا خلق الذين من دونه بل الظالمون في ضلال مبين. ولقد آتينا لقمان الحكمة أن اشكر لله ومن يشكر فإنما يشكر لنفسه ومن كفر فإن الله غني حميد. وإذ قال لقمان لابنه وهو يعظه يا بني لا تشرك بالله إن الشرك لظلم عظيم. ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حملته أمه وهنا على وهن وفصاله في عامين أن اشكر لي ولوالديك إلي المصير. وإن جاهداك على أن تشرك بي ما ليس لك به علم فلا تطعهما وصاحبهما في الدنيا معروفا واتبع سبيل من أناب إلي ثم إلي مرجعكم فأنبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا بني إنها إن تك مثقال حبة من خردل فتكن في صخرة أو في السماوات أو في الأرض يأت بها الله إن الله لطيف خبير. يا بني أقم الصلاة وأمر بالمعروف وانه عن المنكر واصبر على ما أصابك إن ذلك من عزم الأمور. ولا تصعر خدك للناس ولا تمش في الأرض مرحا إن الله لا يحب كل مختال فخور. واقصد في مشيك واغضض من صوتك إن أنكر الأصوات لصوت الحمير. ألم تروا أن الله سخر لكم ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وأسبغ عليكم نعمه ظاهرة وباطنة ومن الناس من يجادل في الله بغير علم ولا هدى ولا كتاب منير. وإذا قيل لهم اتبعوا ما أنزل الله قالوا بل نتبع ما وجدنا عليه آباءنا أولو كان الشيطان يدعوهم إلى عذاب السعير. ومن يسلم وجهه إلى الله وهو محسن فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى وإلى الله عاقبة الأمور. ومن كفر فلا يحزنك كفره إلينا مرجعهم فننبئهم بما عملوا إن الله عليم بذات الصدور. نمتعهم قليلا ثم نضطرهم إلى عذاب غليظ ولئن سألتهم من خلق السماوات والأرض ليقولن الله قل الحمد لله بل أكثرهم لا يعلمون. لله ما في السماوات والأرض إن إن الله هو الغني الحميد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا ليروا أعمالهم فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. القارعة ما القارعة وما أدراك ما القارعة يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدراك ما هي نار حامية. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدع اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين
at the center, do it via WhatsApp, text message, and whatnot. So we'll wait another 5 minutes or so and then get started. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Salam alaikum, everybody, especially our gifted scholars as well. Again, sincere apology for what happened with the previous meeting link. We hope we can have a successful Q&A session. And I believe we have about 131 participants. So hoping that that continues to grow as we progress through the session. So tonight we are having a live Q&A session with multiple centers, multiple scholars throughout North America. We have 5 scholars on today. And this is probably my first experience. I don't know about you guys, but hosting a virtual Q&A session with multiple alims. So bear with us as this is a learning experience, I guess, for us. I'm not sure about everybody else, especially on Zoom. And, we already experienced the bad thing today, which was getting hacked. So anyhow, today's topic is spiritual growth in the light of Karbala. And just have a few logistics to go over, and then just some bios on the scholars that we have on today, so that everybody has a better understanding of what the scholars, what their background is. So multiple ways to ask questions, because we're, potentially we have over 100 people. Not everybody can unmute and ask a question all at once, just to have the flow and the logistics, and being and have this session as progressive as possible. We ask that you use the Slido, which is online posting. The code for that is 786110, as well as the Google Forms. Obviously, you can post on the Google Forms, and we provided these two methods previously in our flyer as well. So if you have that handy, just pull it up and you can post the questions throughout, and we'll be monitoring that. So just some background on the scholars that we have today. First and foremost, we have Maulana Sayyid Hussein Nawab. He's a resident scholar at Joffrey Center in Atlanta, Georgia. He earned his bachelor's of Unani medicine, as well as modern medicine and surgery, from University of Rajasthan in Jaipur, India. He also studied Islamic education in seminary Hausa in Qum, and he also obtained a special degree in tafsir and kalam under Ayatollah Jafar Subhani. He also has a special degree in teaching Quran, special course in teaching youth, while obtaining a degree up to Dars-e-Courage. He also is the author of many books and courses that are listed below. Just to speed up this process, and forgive me, scholars, I'm not going to go through the entire biography for everybody, so that we can actually focus on the main topic at hand. We also have Maulana Sayyid Rizwan Rizvi. He's a resident scholar at Masjid Ali in New Jersey. He was a graduate from University Damascus in Damascus, Syria. He also has a degree in Arabic language from Arabic Language Institute, advanced level studies in both classical and colloquial Arabic. He also has a bachelor's in theology and philosophy, and he was also in Hausa and Qum, Iran as well. He also went to the Imam Ali Seminary in Chicago, Illinois, as well. We also have Maulana Sheikh Muslim Mehdi. He's a fellow at George Washington University. He studied over 11 years in the Islamic Seminary of Qum. Holds multiple master's degree in field of philosophy, religion, and Arabic. Holds a master's degree in political science, and has written thesis on liberty in Islamic political philosophy and liberalism. Right now, Maulana Sheikh Muslim Mehdi is pursuing a graduate studies fellowship at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. We also have Maulana Sayyid Suleiman Hassan. He's a resident scholar at Shah-e Najaf Center in Washington, D.C., Virginia area. He was born and raised in Western New York, where he attended both school and college. While in high school, he would also attend classes in Arabic and fiqh at Hawza in Medina, New York. He's a University of Buffalo Bachelor of Science degree graduate. Then he also went to a Hawza in Qom, Iran to further his Islamic studies. He's a current resident in Chicago, Illinois, with his wife and 2 children. And finally, we have Maulana Sheikh Bilal Hussain, who's a resident scholar at SIJ NY, which is in New York. His background, he was born and raised in New York. He studied from the Hawza of Najaf in Iraq. Currently, he holds the chairman of Zara Trust in the U.S., and he's also serving as a scholar resident at SIJ New York. With that said, I'm going to leave this logistics screen up, and then what I'd like to do is just briefly, if the scholars can unmute and turn on your video if you prefer that. Maulana Sheikh Bilal Hussain, would you like to go ahead and kick it off for us?
Sheikh Bilal, your voice is muted.
Assalamu alaikum. Apologies about that. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So what I was hoping for format, if we can follow along, many of you thankfully have taken the time to submit questions online to us. That we've had a chance to look over some of them, and inshallah we'll continue to look through them and answer them in best to our ability. Bilal, if we can set it up that I can ask you if you can phrase the question and pass it out, and we'll answer them accordingly. Would that be all right?
Absolutely, Sheikh. That's perfectly fine.
Perfect. So inshallah, thank you all respected scholars for joining us. And thank you all of the listeners and participants for joining us. Feel free to ask questions here, as well as inshallah we'll be more than happy to help and answer anything that comes forward after this as well too, I'm sure. Jazakumullah. Thank you, Bilal.
Okay, so the first question, which was posted on the Google Forms, and I'm basically just going through all the questions one at a time, is saying Yali Madad shirk?
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين. Respected scholars and dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And first of all, I'm thankful for giving me this opportunity to be at your service in this wonderful forum. So with the permission of the scholars, if I may, to begin with that. In fact, in a chronological order, it's a wonderful question, especially if it is pointed towards the topic of monotheism, and one of the objections which were posted to Shia Muslims in the society, that they call upon Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam and other imams to help and to seek their intercession. So it's very clear that calling upon Amir al-Mu'mineen or any other imam, it is not only permissible, but it is recommended on the basis of the verses of Holy Quran and the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and other imams of Ahlul Bayt. So, but one thing which is very important to understand when we talk about saying Ya Ali Madad, is it shirk or not? So calling upon anyone or any imam or any personality and considering them the sole helper without the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, indeed, that will be questionable. However, seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the source of all the help, and then based on his command, what is mentioned in Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullah wabtaghu ilayhi al-wasila. that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that come to me through a means. So seeking means to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking intercessor, or in other words, tawassul or istimdad, through the personalities who are closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's the command of the Quran. And it's quite reasonable and rational. So that was a proof from Quran, what I have presented to you. And we can add a rational proof as well, that in our day-to-day routine, we seek help of many things, and especially people who have objection on saying Ya Ali Madad, or seeking Imam Ali's help for our problems and for the solution of our needs. We do take help of spiritual and other physical means to reach to our goals. So we study, we take degrees to earn. So these are the means. So saying Ya Ali Madad to seek Allah's help or Amir al-Mu'mineen's help through Amir al-Mu'mineen seeking Allah's help is not only a shirk, but it is recommended as well. If I am clear, I will stop here because I realized I just started. So other scholars, they should feel free to interject or intervene if they have any insight.
Excellent, Sheikh. Let's move on to our second question, and I'm going to pose this to Maulana Nawab. Salam to all. I've heard of Majlis, I have heard hundreds of Majlis lectures, and nobody has talked about Shahadat of Bibi Zainab alayhi salam. Is it because there is more than one riwayat?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome all our guests, scholars. We're thankful for this really a great opportunity for all of us to see each other and gather our all the centers together so they can know each other and have help from all the scholars they are serving in United States from long time. I know all of them and very well. Allah give them great reward for doing this thing. So as I answer this question, is very simple. Yes, we have multiple riwayat for many imams, and also Bibi Zainab Salamullah alaiha is based on culture or maybe based on the conditions they have at the time to freely commemorate the Shahadat of Bibi Zainab Salamullah alaiha. And on that occasion, we always commemorate his not only Shahadat but also Biladat, and we talk about Bibi Zainab a lot at the time. I think if you go on my Jafri video collections, you're going to find at least like the 10 or 15 majalis about Bibi Zainab, exclusively only given about Bibi Zainab Salamullah alaiha. And all these scholars, alhamdulillah, they are, as our Rizwan and they are also, alhamdulillah, talk about it, most of them. So yes, we talk just on Bibi Zainab on their occasions, especially on 1st of Shaban when we celebrate her birthday, and also on 3 occasions, different occasions when we have other like the riwayat of Shahadat, and multiple occasions we discuss. And yes, like having one or more than like the one Shahadat riwayat is not bad because you may be like the multiple time have opportunity to talk about these personalities and learn more about them. And someone maybe miss one, can get advantage from others, or sometime maybe like the other, like community, they have these things because they got from their like parents, and they not only set up the majalis because they are not contradicting with others, they move a day or other days because of that. So there are many reasons. We are not talking about why we have more than one riwayat, because specific ask, we are not talking about Bibi Zainab. So that's not right. We are talking all the time, and all scholars talk a lot. And she's a role model. She's always mentioned in our majalis on regular basis with Imam Hussein, because she's Sharikatul Hussein. We cannot complete our majlis without her like contribution to mention during the majalis. So we alhamdulillah regularly talking about it for having it. Why we have like the more than one occasions, that is like the very like tough question to answer. Maybe other scholars, if they like to give answers for that, I'm give like the opportunity to them to address it. As my understanding, because of like that very hard time in like the Bani Abbas and Bani Umayyad dynasty, they're not allowing freely like commemorate the shahadat of any imam, and they are giving hard time. So people may be moving from actual date for another date, so they are not maybe caught and not like the punished. It's one reason. Maybe other scholars like they mentioned because of whatever like they heard from like the many our Ravi, and they are giving also more than one occasion to commemorate the thing. But we are the last point very important. We are like celebrate like the Shab Qadr 3 days. So does not mean Shab Qadr is like celebrating more than 1 days is have negative impact. But we especially prepared, inshallah, we get more benefit from just selecting 1 day in place of like multiple time we are doing something. So that's more like the beneficial for us rather than we have a question on that why we have more than one question. I hope this more understandable if other scholar maybe put more like comment on that.
Santum Sayyid Nawab, I think that's a very comprehensive answer. With your permission, I'll just make one additional point, which is that when it comes to the commemorations of Ahlul Bayt, the Ma'asumin, their birth, their martyrdom anniversary, and other the family members of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our primary goal is not historical, but it's to use history as a means for a connection to the life and the mission of Ahlul Bayt. So sometimes in our modern culture, we think that the actual history is the most important thing. But that historical event, the place it took place, the date it took place, that is just a way for us to understand the moral message that those personalities lived for. This is why fuqaha have said, Sayyid Sistani, for example, in an answer to a question about different days of commemoration, he says that every culture, every city should commemorate the, say, martyrdom of an imam, not based on the most accurate historical narration, but rather on the basis of whichever narration is most familiar to the people of that culture. So if a particular date is known to people, then that is the best date to honor that imam and connect with their message, even if there is another narration of equal or maybe greater historical accuracy. So just we should remember that general point that, for example, the courage of Imam Ali on the battlefield or the generosity of Imam Ali with his wealth. This is a known fact that is a fundamental value of Ahlul Bayt that we learn from. Now, a particular incident, did Imam Ali kill a particular enemy on the battlefield, or was it somebody with a different name? Did the battle take place in one way or a different way? Those details are not essential. They're just an example for that principle. So that might help us move beyond getting lost in the history to understanding the underlying principle.
Jazakallah, Sheikh. I believe Maulana Rizwan also had additional comments to add to this.
I think both the Sadat have covered the answer well. Just wanted to add from the historical perspective that in different books, for example, in Muntakhab al-Tawarikh, it is mentioned that she passed away a natural death. And of course, because of all of the musibah that she faced throughout the events of Karbala, and taking care of the Asiran and the captives and bringing them back to Medina. So they believe that because of all of that, she passed away a natural death. Some believe, for example, book called Zainab al-Kubra min al-Mahdi ila al-Lahad, present the idea that it was in the hands of, through the hands of Umayyads, that she attained Shahadat. And therefore, there's a difference as far as the dates, which is Maulana Nawab also referred to, middle of Rajab, 62nd year after Hijrah. This is true, pretty much, a year after the events of Karbala. And also the place of her burial, there's also differences of opinion. For example, Sahib Ayan Shia, he mentions that it is in Baqi, near Abdullah ibn Ja'far, her husband, because they say, well, we don't have any proof that she actually went back to Sham. But some believe that, she actually did go to Sham, and that's where her mazar is, and that's where she's buried. For example, Sheikh Bahai, one of the great scholars, he has this belief that it's a place near Dimashq, which was called Ravia, where she's buried. And then there's some also riwayat that she's buried in Misr, which are actually, there's more, they're more za'if than the other ones. So I think it is a matter which is discussed, maybe not as much because she did not attain this wafat shahada during the events of Muharram and Safar. So her shahadat is outside of Muharram and Safar. But I think she's mentioned quite often. Her wiladat is celebrated, her shahadat is commemorated, and there are various riwayat of her shahadat as well. I think I will remain content with this much because already 2 scholars have spoken about it.
Jazakallah, say Maulana Rizwan. So I'll go ahead and pose this question to you. So in the current atmosphere of COVID-19, how do we maintain a sense of community? Is that even important, since scholars are available from all around the world? Around the world is important to host community catered events.
Well, which is a good thing that the scholars are available, and it is good to be able to reach out to them, as we have not been able to do so in the past, as it has become this virtual way of getting together and meeting. But I think there is a sense of community that sometimes is lost in the midst of all of this. Everyone reacts differently to stressful situations. How you respond to this stress during COVID-19 pandemic can depend on your multiple things: background, your social support for family, your friends, financial situation, your health, your emotional background, the community that you live in. Mashallah, your community, which I'm sure looks out for others, and many other factors. The changes that can happen because of this pandemic and the ways we try to contain the spread of the virus can affect anyone. So there are many people who would respond strongly to the stress, but some would not. For example, the elderly, the young children, people who are caring for family members who are at risk, healthcare providers, right? The first responders, all of these people with disabilities, people with issues of substance use or disorder. So it is important that we need to have this sense of community. Taking care of your friends, your community, your family can be a stress reliever. Actually, there are people who actually look out for this, but it should be balanced with care for yourself. Helping others cope with the stress that they're going through, such as providing social support for them, can also make your community stronger. There should be programs aside from the majalis and the programs that we've been having throughout for the past 6-7 months. During times of increased social distancing, people can still maintain social connections and care for their mental health. Phone calls and video chats, they're big asset at the moment to keep in touch with yourself, with your loved ones. So don't feel socially disconnected or lonely or isolated. I think all of these have to be considered, and use the technology as it is available to you. But there is a need of maintaining this sense of community while you have scholars from all over the world available at your expense. But to be able to host community catered events, I think it is vital, it is important. We shouldn't lose the sense of coming to the centers, which is our one go place where we are facing stress from other areas.
Good way to answer the question. So I'm going to change it up a little bit. And so I'm going to pose these questions, and then I want each of the scholars to maybe spend no more than 2 minutes answering this question. How is Imam Hussein's sacrifice relevant to us today? We can start with Maulana Rizwan.
Imam Hussein's sacrifice, his shahadat, is relevant, as you can see, that what are the values that Imam stood for. When you look at the real issues that are addressed in Karbala, the real messages that we can derive from Karbala, which are affecting our social lives today. Imam Hussein, everybody knows, even the non-Muslims who are inspired by Imam Hussein. What do they look up to Imam Hussein? Because he was Muslim, because he was the grandson of the Holy Prophet? No, they look up to him because he stood up for something which they also cherish, which is justice, which is standing up for tyranny, injustice that was happening at that time, a very, a face of religion or the religious affairs which was manipulated. So Imam stood up for those values which are prevalent today in the society. We're feeling and we are facing a lot of these similar issues by some of these big corporations, maybe big governments, those who are oppressing others. And we see a lot of examples could be seen in Middle East, without naming any countries, but we know the places that are suffering and struggling because of the powers who are Western powers, whatever you want to call it, who are oppressing them for their own agendas. So a lot of these things can be derived from Karbala. And so Karbala will always remain relevant, because as long as a person believes in justice, as long as a person believes in fighting against oppression, Karbala will be relevant forever for us.
Thank you. Sheikh Muslim?
Actually, it's a very profound question, and 2 minutes won't have justice to this question, and Sayyid Rizwan has very eloquently explained. I would just quote one of the sayings of Imam Hussein, and it tells us about those values which Sayyid Rizwan was referring to, the human values. So he addresses to the enemies and tells them, إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَكُمْ دِينٌ وَكُنْتُمْ لَا تَخَافُونَ الْمَعَادَ فَكُونُوا أَحْرَارًا فِي دُنْيَاكُمْ. So it translates, I would paraphrase that, if you do not follow any religion and you are not scared or afraid or mindful of the hereafter, then the minimum thing, the least thing you can do is you can be a free man. So these days, especially in this modern era, and one of the very fascinating slogans of this modern era and modernity is freedom and liberty. So Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, 1400 years ago, is telling us that fact, the value of liberty, the value of freedom. And when he talks about the liberty or the freedom, he talks about the real freedom. He talks about that, don't be obsessed with anything which is against the will of your creator. So it's a very wide scenario what he is telling us and addressing to his enemies. So there is a lot of emphasis on being free man. So free man is not someone who does whatever he wants or she wants to do, but a free man, or a man who has the freedom, the true freedom, is the one who is servant and mindful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands. So nothing else can stop him from doing anything. So that was one of the main messages of Imam Hussein, and I think that is very much relevant to this day and age in our lives, because we see sometimes we are obsessed with technology. So we say that we are using it and these things are in our service, but in fact, we are at their service. We have become slaves to technology, for instance. Our materialistic means, our cars, our houses, our luxury lifestyle, our holidays. So,
Account.
sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve. I think
No, I was just saying humorously our Zoom account.
true. Continue with that. Bismillah. I think I have transgressed my time.
No. Jazakumullah.
True, a very good example.
Santam, so if it's my turn, I think we've had two very good answers from Sayyid Rizwan, Sheikh Muslim. One thing I would add is that there is a tendency in human nature, and especially in modern society, to try to treat the symptoms of a problem. And one of the things that we learned from Imam Hussein is that you need to go to the root. And generally, if we have a social problem, if we have an economic problem, if we have a political problem, then the root is not just in economics or in politics or in society. The root is a religious and a spiritual problem. And the reform, for lasting and meaningful reform, it must come from the spiritual level first. And that's a mistake that many people, even after centuries have passed, we still make in society, non-Muslims as well as many Muslims. Yes, there needs to be a solution for income inequality. But if we don't treat the spiritual reason why people are greedy, why they are unsympathetic to others who are in need, then it will be a temporary solution. And the lasting solution comes from a reform of our values and understanding the true message of Islam, which is to reflect justice internally as well as externally. And that's how Imam Hussein responded to Yazid. Everybody could see Yazid was evil. Even the people of Medina, the people of Hijaz, the people of Iraq, they all understood that Yazid was not a qualified person to lead a masjid, let alone the entire Muslim world. But the responses were often misguided or deficient. And what Imam Hussein said is that the problem is not that Yazid drinks. The problem is not that Yazid takes advantage of slaves or the poor. The problem is much deeper than that. And that is where Imam Hussein began his mission, to reform people's understanding of religion.
Excellent. Maulana Nawab or Sheikh Bilal, would you like to add anything to that?
Brother Rizwan, Brother Sheikh Muslim and Rizwan, I really answered very nicely. But I just, so you see, if we have religion in our life, it's going to make our religion meaningful. Only Karbala is the source to keep it alive. And Tawheed, Nabuwat, Imamat, Adl Qayamat, everything is right now we have in our possession because of Karbala. So as long we need to know the Tawheed, the only right path we can reach to the Tawheed is Karbala. Understanding the true meaning of justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, justice in the society given by Imam Hussein as-Salam in the Karbala. These are about Usul-Din. All Usul-Din are right now believed by all the Muslims, served by Imam Hussein as-Salam. So as long as beliefs are necessary, Karbala is going to be relevant. Goes to the furu, all the furu, namaz, roza, zakat, khums, amr ma'ruf, nahi munkar. None of them can be like the preserved without Imam Hussein's teaching, or especially when you go in majalis, everything is, every year they give a new reasoning to believe in these things and practice properly. Without regular teaching, there's no way we can keep our furu perfect. And these furu are perfect because of like the Karbala. So both usul side or furu side, if we can see the main source of like knowledge is Karbala. So Karbala always remain like relevant for us. But mainly, if it's question how we make it relevant to non-Muslims, that is a big question. We have to like see how we approaching them. We have to select like Imam Hussein's like the codes as Sheikh Muslim code very nicely. So these things we have to propagate, put on the big billboard on time of like the Muharram to reach out to the non-Muslim community about Imam Hussein and address them why Imam Hussein is relevant for us, because this is like the best thing har kaum pukari ke hamare Hussein not yet came. So we have to like the make our goal and introduce Imam Hussein for everyone, so they can like the make him idol for as a human being, as a good like person who serve his like the God and also like the religion, and we can make it role model for everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Maulana Nawab. So we're going to change topics a little bit, and this question is for Maulana Suleiman Hassan. Once a loved one is placed on ventilator, and the physicians are informing you that multi-organ failure persists or worsen despite active treatment, is it permissible to withdraw care under the advisement of a physician, i.e., pull the plug? Is it advisable allowed to have a DNR, do not resuscitate, order in place for older parents?
So I'll give a general answer, inshallah, which is an answer of the principle. And then the application of that principle to a person's individual circumstances, that depends on the advice of physicians and the diagnosis of that individual patient. The principle in Islam is that life is sacred, and we must do everything in our power to preserve life, even if the chance of recovery is low, and even if there is pain associated with the treatment, because we don't own our own existence. We didn't bring ourselves into existence. So theologically, I don't get to choose when and how I die. Life is a gift from Allah, and Allah is the one who will choose when my life comes to an end. We recognize that death is a reality. It's a stage of life, but it's something that is up to God. So sometimes people ask that question, that if you believe a believer goes to Allah, why is it that a Muslim prays for long life? Why is it that a Muslim prays for ill relatives not to die? Why is it that we avoid death and we are required to seek treatment and so on to avoid death? The answer is very simple. Because life is a gift from Allah, and we always pray to Allah to increase His gifts to us, because it is through those gifts that we can earn His pleasure, we can obey Him, and we can earn His reward in the hereafter. And we have an obligation to do what we can by seeking treatment to preserve that gift. Just like if you give me a gift, then by protecting and preserving that gift, I'm honoring my relationship with you. So that's the philosophical basis. The answer to the question is that it is required to begin treatment and to continue treatment if there is any chance that it will prolong life. If there comes a point when treatment may have more harm than good, or there is no reasonable hope that it's going to prolong life, then many of our fuqaha, for example, Sheikh Makarim Shirazi, they have said that it is permissible to stop or to withhold treatment at that point. And that could include, for example, do not resuscitate. So the philosophical and the principled answer is that whenever there is the possibility of treatment preserving life, prolonging life, it is an Islamic obligation to do so, even if it is not guaranteed, and even if there is hardship or difficulty involved in that treatment. But if there comes a point when the treatment itself is risky, it may introduce new complications and problems, or where there is no reasonable hope that it will prolong life, then it is not required to continue or begin that course of treatment.
Thank you so much for that answer. So I'm going to post this question for Sheikh Bilal. You know, he's been very quiet. So I'm going to pose this to him. Please elaborate on the scene depicted in Surah Al-Marij.
Al-Ma'arij, perhaps?
Yes, sir. Marij.
Sayyid Sulaiman, are you more familiar with this? I'm not sure where the question came from.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
which scene is this that's being referred to?
Is when the Sa'il asked for Azab in Waqi, is that the one?
Oh, the beginning opening verses.
Yeah. Sa'ala Sa'ilun bi Azabin Waqi. Is that what they're referring to?
I didn't get a reference point, but I believe that's what they are referring to.
Haris ibn Numan al-Fahri, I believe, is the person
Yes.
who had asked this Azab to come upon him when the Holy Prophet had announced the Vilayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen at Ghadir Khum. And he came up to Prophet and he inquired, if this is from you, we believed in everything that you have told us thus far. Now you're going to impose this upon us as well. Is it really from you or is it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The Prophet responded that everything that I say is from Allah. Ma yantiqu anil hawa in huwa illa wahyun yuha. Quran is testifying that Prophet doesn't utter a word unless, you know, it is a wahi. And even the actions of the Prophet, ma ramaita idh ramaita walakin Allah rama. So Prophet said, yes, it is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he said, well, if that's the case, then I ask for azab to come upon me at this moment, which kills me, or, you know, by which I'm perished. And therefore, the first ayat of this chapter, Surah Ma'arij, was revealed. And this person, I believe there's the stone that came down, which struck him on his head, and he died on the scene right away. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that azab to him as he had requested it. I think that's what they're referring to. So the ayat says, Sa'ala sa'ilun bi'adhabin waqi lil kafirina laysa lahu dafi'. Someone has needlessly demanded to experience the torment of God, as this person, Haris ibn Numan al-Fahri, which will inevitably seize the disbelievers. And that's the reference to, a historical reference to that ayat.
Excellent. Okay, so this is for anybody, and this is more of a technique or a process that somebody can incorporate, you know, as early as today. So for all the namaz you have missed, how can you make up for it, or how can you start making up for the namaz? And I believe, you know, personally, it's more about a technique, right? How you can incorporate trying to make up your namaz into your daily routines.
Sheikh Bilal, would you like to begin with that, because we haven't heard from you for a while?
All right. There's an interesting perspective on qada salat that, for example, some of the older ulama used to say that if you develop qada namaz, it's something you have to fulfill before you do anything else. And contemporary ulama, for example, have opened it up to say that no, it's something that's an obligation that should be fulfilled. Some of the techniques that, for example, have been discussed, and something that, you know, can be, there's a few different things, right? First off, one of the things is it's 17 rakats a day. We learn what the wajibat and the mandatory parts are. We can remove the mustahabbat from the qada that we have to perform and just do the wajibat that are required to perform. So the first thing that we do is we need to educate ourselves about what is the wajibat of our salat, to make sure that we perfect those, perform them correctly, and ensure for the qada that we have to perform, we make sure that at least we're taking care of those obligations. Second, we have, for example, the narration of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, where he gives the attributes of a mu'min, including the recitation of 51 rakats a day. One of the things that you can do is remove the mustahabbat from your day and incorporate your qada in place of them. And if you perform your 17 wajibat and 2 days of qada, you get to 51 rakats in a day. So what you can do is you can complete 51 rakats a day, but do 2 days of qada along with your one wajib. Now, how do you incorporate them into the day? And this is something unique that depends upon your schedule and how your time frame allows. So, for example, one of the things that works for some people is that at Fajr, Salat al-Fajr, it's 2 rakat, you add 1 day's qada right there. and you complete one day's qada at that time. And then after Salat al-Isha, for example, at the end of your day, you incorporate one day's qada there as well too. Once I know what my wajibat of my salat are, then I can go through this process of making sure that my salat is complete and accurate and performing this salat and incorporating it into various parts of my day. If you wanted to do it, for example, the way the nawafil are broken out during the day. So for example, you would do 2 rakat at Fajr, 8 rakat at Dhuhr, 8 rakat at Asr, 4 rakat at Maghrib, 2 rakat at Isha. And then you can, for example, add in Salat al-Layl, 11 rakats, you can do your qadha then, and you can break it out in different ways. One of the ways that I've seen my teachers recommended is that they would say, when you wake up for tahajjud, inshallah you wake up for tahajjud, instead of the 8 rakat of nawafil, do one day's qadha there. And you do one day's qadha there, and that way you start your day. And then the other way you break it out at one other point in your time during the day. But it has to be a priority. The other thing that I do recommend, and one of the things that I've been doing in New York is, when we had our Saturday morning Fajr programs, we would recite at least 1 or 2 days worth of qadha salat as a jamaat. So anyone who has qadha, they know that the community is promoting, that as a community we acknowledge each of us has obligations that we need to perform. And our job as a community is to try and promote that we do these obligations together and we make sure that they're performed together. So we would have a session where, anybody who had qadha salat, they can join us and, we can do a day's qadha on Saturday morning so that it reiterates the importance of fulfilling your qadha, and it creates a time in the community that you feel supported, and you can create a process where everybody works together. Long and short of it.
Excellent. Okay, let's change topics again. And I'll post this question, and then whoever wants to take it. Why didn't the tribe of Bani Asad, why didn't they help Imam Hussein on the day of Ashura?
Well, I can begin a brief answer, I guess. It wasn't just the tribe of Bani Asad. So we have to kind of look at the entire political and social context of Iraq at that time. And similar to the events right after the death of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Arabia was largely a tribal society. And in particular, Banu Asad, they had a tribal structure, and the entire city of Kufa was based in a tribal structure. So the neighborhoods of Kufa, which were known as Hayy, every neighborhood was a tribe or a clan of a tribe. And there was an arif, an official who was both a tribal official and a municipal official at the same time, who was in charge of ensuring that government policy was carried out in their neighborhood or in their region. So both in the city of Kufa and on the outskirts of the city of Kufa, where many of the members of the Asad tribe lived, you had that kind of a structure where people followed their leaders. The leaders, because they had wealth, because they often had trade and other business interests, for example, in Syria, in Hijaz, other areas, they were very much susceptible to the pressure, the threats, and the bribery of the government. And what Ibn Ziyad did previously as the governor of Basra for Muawiyah and Yazid, and then when he was also made governor of Kufa, is he used both the threat of the Umayyad wrath and the bribery of their wealth to make the chiefs of the different tribes abandon the path of Ahlul Bayt. And the same thing happened with Banu Asad. Now, there were a number of people who were afraid. They might not have known how they could help the Imam, because remember, there was a curfew, there was a blockade, and there was also prevention of any information leaving the city of Kufa and getting to people. So on the night before Ashura, we actually do have mentioned that Habib ibn Mudahir went, and because he was a member of the tribe of Asad, to the outskirts of Karbala and convinced a number of people to come and try to join Imam Hussein. But they were intercepted and attacked by Umar ibn Sa'ad's army. They scattered, and then with difficulty, Habib brought himself back to the camp of the Imam. So in short, tribal structure, when the head of the clan or tribe is bribed or is threatened or is imprisoned, then the remainder of the people often don't know what to do, and they're not able to act effectively. And then you had bribery, you had threats. Limited number of people did wish to come, but they were easily intercepted and turned back. And they didn't have the courage to continue to fight and actually make an attempt to break that siege of the Imam's followers in Karbala.
A
Excellent.
very excellent answer by Sayyid Suleiman. Just one quick note I would like to add, especially referring to the question. Question itself is not a very good question in the regard of generalization. So many of the times this question is also asked by us that, for instance, Kufis invited Imam Hussein and they killed Imam Hussein themselves. So this question is not the right question. As Said Suleiman has very beautifully explained. Very similarly, we cannot say the question which was asked, why Bani Asad did not come to help Imam. The question is wrong, so we cannot generalize, especially when he just has mentioned, we had Habib ibn Mudahir, we have Muslim ibn Awsaja, we have Qais bin Musahar, and we have other members of Bani Asad tribe as well. So I would like to take this opportunity by telling the audience that if this question is asked at the very first place, why Bani Asad did not come to help Imam before the tragic event of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, we have to correct the question that this question is wrong. They were there with Imam Hussein. Some who are not there, for many reasons they were not there. But in general or in entirety, Bani Asad was not a tribe who has betrayed Imam.
Excellent follow-up, Jazakallah. So I'm going to post this question to Maulana Rizwan. Salam, when did the family of Imam Hussein alayhi salam return to Karbala? Was it on the 40th Arba'een or 1 year from his death? And continuing, if they returned 1 year from his death, then what effect did the khutbah of Bibi Zainab and Imam Sajjad alayhi salam have in Sham in Yazid's court?
Thank you for that question, but I just wanted to add something to the previous one as well. Actually, there is a fact where Bani Asad, when Habib ibn Malahir went to them, invited them, they said labbaik to him, and they were coming. And this news actually was reached Ibn Ziyad, or rather Umar ibn Sa'ad, and he, with his people by the name Azraq ibn Harbi Saydawi, he sent 400 men to fight the tribe of Bani Asad. And they actually did meet on the night. They were trying to make it to the Lashkar of Imam Hussein. They were on their way, but near Furat, their path was closed off and they could not come across. So there is a riwayat of that's mentioned in Maqatil, where they were making their way to Imam for his nusrat, for his help, but their path was cut off, and many of them actually returned because there was this, the war had begun before the actual war. So just wanted to add to that. As far as the discussion on when did Ahl Haram return, of course, there are many take on this. Two most popular, which is that they returned a year later. Some believe in that. I think pretty much in subcontinent, that is how it is portrayed, and that is how it's mentioned. That's how we have, heard in our majalis growing up. So in subcontinent, that is the notion that they stayed for an entire year. And they believe that if you make it less than a year, it seems like Ahl Bayt did not suffer enough. So you're lowering their suffering if they stayed anything less than a year. That is not the case. Even 1 day in prison for Ahl Bayt is a great suffering. But the other popular notion is that they actually returned in the same year on Arba'in, and they made it back to Karbala on Arba'in. And this is where the famous riwayat of Jabir, companion of the Holy Prophet, who actually made his way as the first Zair of Imam Hussein to Karbala. And the Masaiba recited that when Jabir was there on the Arba'in, on the day of Arba'in, he sees the caravan is coming, and then he steps back because Al-Haram had arrived. So that is one take on it. The reason behind it is because when they left on 11th and they arrived in Kufa, they did not stay in Kufa for too long. They were sent right away toward Sham. And it's a long travel between Kufa and Sham. It may have taken them a couple of weeks to arrive. And as we have the popular riwayat that they arrived on the beginning of the month of Safar, and that's where you hear the Masaib of Sham. But in the very beginning, when Yazid invites them and they come to his court and he's doing all of those things, there were many reactions that took place within the court of Yazid. Ambassador of Rome stands up and speaks against it. Or Sahabi of Rasul, who lost his life, and he stands up and he defends Ahlul Bayt, seeing what was being done to Imam Hussein. Yazid's own family, remember his wife, his daughter, they also protested to what he was doing to the women of Ahlul Bayt. So there was this revolt that he feared was happening within his own circle. So he had to, of course, end that meeting and end that, as he had called upon Ahlul Bayt to be presented there, and he was trying to humiliate them. And the khutbah of Imam Zain al-Abidin, as he stood up, and Yazid had to stop by giving the adhan so that Imam does not continue on speaking. The khutbah of Bibi Zainab. All of these things tell us that Yazid could not have kept them for any longer. If he did, his own government would be in jeopardy. So because of this revolt, most popular stance is that they actually stayed there for a few days, which was very difficult for them, of course. But Yazid had to bow to the demands, and he actually let them go, and he asked them how they want to leave. The way they were brought in with all of the with all disrespect, they were sent back with all of the respect. So right away, that is the biggest victory of Ahlul Bayt, that within a few days, how they were able to conquer that person who's thinking that he has done everything and achieved that glory. So that's probably is a more popular stance, as they returned the very same year, and they arrived, and they wanted to go through Karbala. So they went past Karbala. So they returned back to Karbala, and on the day of Arba'in. So if they arrived in Sham, let's say on the 1st of Safar, they stayed there for a couple of days, and then they left right away, so they could arrive in Karbala on 20th of Safar, which would be the Chehlon, which would be the Arba'in, and then they made their way back to Medina.
Excellent. So following in the same question or along the same lines, so why Yazid's army let Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam live when they didn't even let Shahzada Qasim live?
So, okay. So Maulana Sayyidina, Fadl, Bismillah.
Shahzad Qasim was not sick. He came for fighting, so he got opportunity to have jihad that day. Imam Zain al-Abidin purposely fell sick because Allah want to save the chain of Imamat through him. And when someone is sick, he's not allowed to come in battlefield and fight. So this was strategy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or like the way to save Imamat, because his jihad is a bit different than Hazrat Qasim alayhi salam. And that's like there's one mention, and give the chronology, like to turn back on like the first Arba'in. There's something stuck in between the days, if you calculate, because there's a riwayat he stayed in like the Fort Sham at least a week or so, as far in Kufa for a week or so. If we add up these things, that cause like the Indian and subcontinental scholars to think they return after 1 year, because the numbers adding up is not matching with the 40 days. So they say maybe it's next year. But as nowadays they're discussing, if you have short up or cut down these things, then maybe in the same year. It doesn't matter first year or second year, the suffering is great. And that is like the point of view depend on the like the detailed study, because Imam Hussein, like the head is buried there. That is one of the why. There's so many other things as Habib Sakina died and other like reasonings. There are sometimes when you put the numbers, they are like not matching with that thing. So he mentioned the same thing in the beginning. That is like the subcontinental scholars like the study, and they propagate the message through members in the Masai. The return is next year of Arba'in. But nowadays, many scholars like that get their written in the first, like the Arba'in. There's no harm in that because this like the maybe their study. So you can keep both of them, which one you feel like more accurate according to your chronology and number of days where they stayed and how long it took them. So you can mention both things are acceptable. There's no doubt in that. When you hear from one scholar, he say written first, like the year, don't doubt on that. Like maybe his studies there. Some will say written after 1 year. Maybe he has like some other numbers which maybe not known for that. So this may be like the answer of both questions.
Thank you, Maulana. So let me ask somebody this one question. We all know that Imam Hussein took basically he knew what was going to happen, and we've learned through all of the majlis and the readings that he knew what was going to happen to him in Karbala. So what made him take the family, the children, even the sick? What was he trying to convey in taking them with him to Karbala?
So I'll step in here for a second. When we take a look at the caravan of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and we see family, women, and children, one of the things that we know about the absolute stance of Imam Hussein of justice against injustice is the principle that Imam Hussein's approach, and when he himself says, إنما خرجت لإصلاح أمة جدي, that I have left to repair the nation of my grandfather, was to show that he wasn't interested in power and authority. There's a few different ways you can take a look at it. One is if we take a look at it in a historical context and we see an army against a family, and we say that this family had never had the intention of fighting. They weren't there to fight, meaning it proves the authenticity of the approach of Imam al-Hussein wasn't for war and for seeking of power. Another aspect that we can take a look at is the approach in the bringing of family was to see if there was any humanity left in these people. The invocation of humanity, that I'm not here as a warrior, I'm here as someone who is coming for peace and to upright and to correct the problems that are in the ummah of people submitting to the authority of an oppressor, a dhalim, a fasiq, a fajr, someone who outright sins, that take a look and see that you're not seeing me chasing after power, but rather the correction of a nation. Which is why, for example, one of the points that we discuss is the shahadat of Hazrat al-Asr, alayhi salam, that this Abdullah al-Radhi or Ali Naskar, what was the point of his coming to the battlefield if not for the invocation of humanity and to show and demonstrate that Imam al-Hussein, even in that moment, he's saying, look, give this child water, invoking the humanity of these people to bring them back to reality. So we can take a look at it from both sides. If we take a look at it from a distance, helicopter view, we see that this man is with his family to show that he's not in the search of power and authority, and that his approach was for goodness and correction, and that he was oppressed by the fact that they sent an army against him. And if we take a look at the up close aspect, we take a look and see that his use, not his use, but his presentation of his family with him was to invoke humanity, that they should see that these are people who are standing up for truth and justice of the Imam and for love of the Imam, and not for power or authority or wealth.
Excellent. So we originally planned to stop at 10:30. Can we go on for maybe 10 to 15 minutes longer beyond 10:30? Is that okay with everybody?
I think it depends. If there's a lot of unanswered questions, we might even be able to have a follow-up session. So let's take a look and see, what is the extent of unanswered questions.
Okay. So there's quite a bit between the Slido app and the Google Forms. So we'll try to cover majority of it, but let's see what happens. So let's try this one. So the question is, Salam, how many Hindu people were with Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Ashura? As I learned that Husseini Burmans were offered uh, Burmans were offered help to Imam.
Say Nawab, would you like to answer that question?
As you know, in 72 martyrs, none of them were there. Yes, some Christians were there, but not Hindu people were included in the martyr. Maybe they approached Imam later on, but they reached there because whatever, like some of the historian mention, because of revelation between Ahlul Bayt and some kings in India, they sent the army, but they reached when Imam Hussein already martyred. So they were not participated in the Battle of Karbala to give their sacrifice, as I know. If some other additional information other scholars may have, they can light that thing.
Excellent. So there's one question. This was posted on Google Forms. This is sort of changing topics a little bit, but how can we justify living in the West when we don't agree religiously with certain decisions our government makes? Parts of our taxes go for military funding and whatnot. So just sort of a more of a political and then religious aspect to that question, I believe. Oh, come on. Somebody can answer that question.
Briefly, I can address it. This is something that's not new, and it's not only about the West. The vast majority of Muslim countries now are governed by autocratic and repressive rulers. So the principle we have in Islam is that if you have taxes, for example, that are taken from you by compulsion, you're not morally liable for where they're going to get spent. Even in the time of the imams and afterwards, people would sometimes go for Hajj. There would be bandits or oppressive governments that would steal from pilgrims, and they would use that money for procurement of weapons to cause death and destruction against other innocent people. And so some people thought that, well, we shouldn't go for Hajj because we're indirectly funding those evildoers. And the Imam said that, no, you go for Hajj. This is not your responsibility. Yes, if there is a danger to your life and the conditions for Hajj are not wajib, that's a separate story. But simply because it might indirectly cause a government to have funds, that's their moral liability, not yours. So we should choose an environment for ourselves and our family where we have the best ability to practice our religion and where we have the best ability to affect a positive change, either by spreading our beliefs, by advocating against injustice or oppression. And if we do that, and we are in the frontier or outside of a Muslim majority country, then our role may be just as important or more important than somebody who lives in a Muslim country. So to give a short answer and not get too long-winded, don't think of it as Muslim country, not Muslim country. Don't think of it just in terms of the superficial, do you hear the adhan in the neighborhood or not? There is a possibility that a person living in a non-Muslim society can do a great deal of good for Islam, and there are ahadith that that praise this. One of those ahadith is quoted in Al-Fiqh al-Muqtaribin of Sayyid Sistani, I believe from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. And it is possible that a person lives in a Muslim country but is not able to create an Islamic environment for himself or herself or for their family. So if I'm in a non-Muslim society and the neighborhood I live in, the city I live in, does not have access to a Muslim institution, I should move. Not necessarily to a Muslim country, but maybe closer to a masjid, maybe closer to a community so I can practice and I can protect my and my family's religion. And if there is a case where I'm not able to practice my religion in the values I have, then I may have to move outside of that society altogether. But that's not a universal thing that somebody living in a non-Muslim majority country or in a Western country automatically will have to leave.
Thank you for that. And so let me ask this question. Let's see. What are some of the ways for modern thinking generation to understand what the importance of older cultural traditions? How is it the best way not to confuse tradition with religion? And I think, some of the younger generations generally have a little bit of a clash sometimes with some of the elders because, some of the things that they do or traditions or whatnot, they generally don't fall into the religious aspect of it, even though they do it. So I think this is just basically a question around, how does the younger generation try to understand, or how do they value some of these cultural aspects of the religion as well?
Until we hear from one of our other scholars.
So maybe let's start off with I don't know, Sheikh Bilal. You want to try to start that off, and maybe we can pass it over to Sheikh Muslim.
And you guys are having fun tonight, huh? All right. Okay. When we look at culture, right, a first generation, which is what majority of our youth are in this country, are in the process of fusing two cultures together. They're taking the culture of their parents and the history that they came with, and they're taking the culture and the environment that they're actively growing up in and living in on a day-to-day basis. Now, generally what's seen is that when we fuse two cultures together, we create something new that actually has better attributes and characteristics than either of the two that it came from, because you're giving a critical eye and choosing and selecting aspects of each that apply to your day-to-day life, and you're taking and using an intellectual approach to constantly make a decision between what the tradition you're getting from one side and what the tradition you're getting from the other side, and you're choosing and creating something new. Now, the consequence of that is that you don't have the same traditions and culture as your parents had. You have something different because it reflects the environment that you're in. This is a unique situation. Now, traditionally, what happens is that a culture changes gradually over a period of time because you perform the same attributes on a day-to-day basis. New knowledge comes in, new knowledge shifts the fundamentals, and gradually you have a progressive change in an environment. Us living in America, we're doing something very different because the American culture is something, our traditional culture, whether it's India, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, is something else, and we're fusing the two together. What that causes is it causes conflict because you're not going to recreate either the Indian culture, so you don't quite exactly fit in there, and you're not going to recreate the American culture, so you don't quite exactly fit in there. And it causes conflict. Now, with Americans, conflict can be that, okay, I don't live with these people, I don't see them, all right, fine, conflict happens, it happens, I'm not one of them, they're not one of me, we're done. But when that same conflict comes on the other side with our parents, with our family, with our society, we see it as a problem. Now, the benefit, what we should be looking at is we should be thanking Allah that, one, He's given us the benefit of all of this variety of information access, and that He's giving us the opportunity to improve. And the obligation of the one who improves is not to abuse the one who came before him or be harsh with them, rather to be kind and calm and approachable and be someone who is soft and gentle and gradually brings about change. Look at the example of Rasulullah. Look at the example of Ahlul Bayt. They lived, remember, Rasulullah was the light in darkness. He took the worst of cultures, but he didn't condemn these people. He didn't hate them. Remember, those people were polytheists. Our families are not polytheists. They have a difference in culture. If we want to change them, we have to do it the same way, gradually, calmly, with education, with information, and understanding that the difference that we're creating with them is not because we're great and amazing and they're horrible and evil, but rather because our environment that they gave us has allowed us to look at things with a critical eye. So when we want to make change, we should be humble about it. We should be appreciative about it. We should be cautious about it, not to harm them, not to abuse them, not to be ungrateful to Allah who gave us these parents and gave us these responsibilities, that we can improve our community and move it forward. Okay, sorry. Sheikh Muslim, please take over.
No, you have explained in a very wonderful manner. I would add just a couple of things. First thing which I would like to mention in the same lines, what you just have said, and you have very well advocated on the behalf of the parents, but for the children and for the youth as well, just a supportive argument from Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So one of the sayings attributed to him, and I believe it is in Nahjul Balagha as well, he says, لا تقصروا أولادكم على آدابكم فإنهم مخلوقون لزمان غير زمانكم. So in other words, do not impose your values or your own traditions upon your children, because they are created for another time other than in which you are living. So not necessarily that all the customs, traditions we were following or our parents were following, especially in back homes or in Eastern countries. So now we have to bring all of them alive in Western societies, even at the cost of some of the rebellion attitude by the youth or the children. So there should be a soft corner from both sides. And as Sheikh Bilal as very eloquently has said, that it should take place in a very rational and gradual manner. So there shouldn't be rift. So we should have understanding on both sides. And the other dimension of this question, probably someone who has asked this question had this in mind as well, because I heard the word traditional. So it's a very familiar word, traditionalism or traditional Islam, in comparison to modern Islam. So a very active movement going on in Islamic world and Muslims living in West as well for past a few decades, that we want to be modern Muslims. So when we say that we want to be modern, we see that modern Islam in clash with traditional Islam. So if that was the question, it has to be addressed in a different manner. That the modern values, which we see especially in the West, and now they are also prevalent in Eastern societies as well, are they in clash with Islam, or the traditional Islam, which we have the interpretation in our minds, is that Islam in fight with the modern Islam? So I think the spectrum of these two questions, the arena, both are different. If we look at the second environment, the second possibility, which I just have mentioned, then we have to look this question in another way, because the modern values, especially the philosophical viewpoint of rejecting the metaphysics or rejecting the notion of right and wrong and creating doubts and everything. So if those values are meant that they are not in line with Islam, or they are not in coherence with Islam, then there should be a different kind of discourse taking towards the understanding of this question.
Excellent. So if you don't mind, let's do maybe one more question, and then I'm going to just ask for a small surprise or a pop, something that you just have to think right away for all the scholars. And that's sort of a ending to the session tonight. So just You don't have to prepare or anything like that. It'll just be a quick pop, one sentence or a one or two sentences. So, but before we get to that, the last question for tonight. So, people who could have helped Imam Hussein alayhi salam could have on the day of Ashura didn't. Do they have a chance in heaven?
There's silence.
The door of Tawbah is always open. There are certain actions that we do that prevent us from having the tawfiq of Tawbah. But from the side of Allah, the door of Tawbah, repentance, is always open. So Allah will never withhold the possibility of seeking forgiveness and entering paradise. But if I deliberately and continuously do evil things in such a way that I close off my own receptivity to that guidance of Allah, then I will not be able to avail myself of that guidance. It's kind of like, if I weaken my eyesight until I turn blind, the light will still shine, God will still provide sunshine, but I will not be able to see it. So for somebody who could have helped Imam Hussein and didn't, if they were ignorant, if they repent, the possibility of forgiveness is always there from Allah. But if somebody knew better and deliberately withheld their support, then it might be the case that that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and that would prevent them from having tawfiq. And only Allah knows. But in principle, as long as we are alive, the gate of repentance is never closed from Allah's side, unless we close it on our own selves.
Excellent. Anybody else would like to add anything to that?
Whoever heard the Halmin Nasrin, Yansrona, like the voice, and he did not answer, they are not like among the people they can maybe repent because they choose at the time. But rest of them, as Salman answered, very excellent answer. People are trying, they never heard how they react. So you read in the ziyarat, they say 3 types of people. They heard this news and they happy with after hearing and pleased with that. So they are also not going to receive the mercy, but they regret, they say, if I wish there, whoever say, yeah, let any kuntumakum fafuzumakum, yes, they surely among them, and they can include in that. So if this is the scenario at the time, the people present in the Karbala or in other places, it's based on that. And Brother Salman answered very nicely on this, right?
Excellent. So I know we're out of time, and before we end the session tonight, so wanted to ask all the scholars just one question, and the answer just can be one sentence, a statement, or anything. So, what is that one thing or one statement that you ask yourself, whether you believe in meditation or meditating in the morning or whatnot, but what is that one thing that you ask yourself on a daily basis that makes you a better Muslim every day? Whether that's a verse out of the Quran, a question that you ask yourself daily, a statement that you make to yourself. What is that just helps you mentally focus on being a better person one day at a time?
I can start, so I'll leave early. One thing that we do find, and I'll take the approach from the tradition and the riwayat, is the accountability aspect that ulama akhlaq, they mention 3 steps and that one should follow on daily basis. When you wake up in the morning, what you should do is musharata, and that you should do this conditions with you and your God. And then throughout the day, you should do muraqabah, that you should follow along with this condition that you have set. And then at the end of the day, you should do muhasabah, the accountability, so that if there was anything that you missed or you did not do, you're able to ask for a repentance, or if you were able to do it, you continue on to it. So in one short sentence, it would be keeping yourself accountable on daily basis. Of course, all the obligations that we have, those things which are fulfilled, but to continue to keep yourself accountable on daily basis. There are many riwayat in this reference that who does not keep themselves accountable on daily basis is not from me. I believe our seventh Imam had said this, riwayat from him. So keep yourself accountable on daily basis. Riwayat says, hasib nafsaka qabla an tuhasib. Account yourself before you are accounted for. Wazin qabla an tuzan, and weigh your nafs before it is weighed in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and prepare yourself for the hereafter. So that would be my one thing that I tell my kids, and our youth, and everyone, not just kids. Everyone should be keeping themselves accountable on daily basis.
Santum, can we just upvote that answer?
I don't think they built that functionality into Zoom yet.
So my dua is simply that, oh Allah, make the end and the outcome of our affairs to be what is best. So this is a promise that Allah has given us in the Quran, that if we do good, if we are pious, we will make mistakes, but Allah will correct and rectify our mistakes so that the end result is better than our own abilities and our own potential. In Surah Al-Ahzab, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ittaqullah wa qulu qawlan sadida. O you who believe, be pious with respect to your duty to Allah, and say a good word. يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ. And if you do that, then Allah will fix the mistakes that you made. So I will cook a deficient meal, but Allah will put flavor in it and make it turn out well. And that will be the story of my life. وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ. And Allah will make the end result forgive my sins. So the dua is, Allahumma ja'al aqibata umurina khaira. Oh Allah, make us successful and achieve salvation as the outcome of our life.
Sheikh Muslim?
It's a very difficult question, and to be very honest, I am not that pious to tell you what do I do, and that could be something for people to follow. But one very, very quick reminder, because it's not only when you wake up you recite that. Everyone recites that minimum 10 times a day. Surah Al-Fatiha, one verse which I usually try to contemplate upon, especially in the beginning of the day or throughout the day. That is the fifth verse, if you include Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the numbers. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Thee do we serve, and thee do we beseech for help. So that helps me a lot whenever you are going through the difficulties, you are going through the different challenges of the day. So you are the one I need you to help me, and you are the one I try myself to be humble in front of you, and to be servant of you, and to worship you. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ.
Excellent. Mawlan Nawab?
All three things are really very nice. As Brother Rizwan said, like the musharata, muraqaba, and muhasaba. That's the main goal for our life. You do regularly, you never be fed from your right path. And dua, as Brother Salman said, and this that you have to visualize Allah is watching you, as Brother Muslim said, you have to when you say Ya Nabdo, Ya Nasta'in in your salat, you understand you're talking directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're that kind of tawheed, but as the teacher, I can just advise all especially our young fellows are in our meeting, as the most important thing, update your wajibat. Whatever you learn in past, never rely on that. Go to scholars, ask them to check again and again. Maybe you're doing wuzu, is maybe good, but why not check again? We always update you the apps, you update you the gadgets. So go update, check you salat, you maybe because of some When you start improving your wajibat, you're going to have a really great progress in your life. You see the result, because sometimes we are making mistake and we are just doing again and again, and that stop the progress. And in the morning, just you decide one thing is, I'm going to acquire knowledge. Maybe if you are earning member, I'm going to earn that much. You make sure you have to like the promise yourself, I'm not going to miss any wajib. At least I'm going to fulfill my wajibat today by grace of Allah. And if you completing that wajibat, you are among the muttaqi, because as Imam Hassan al-Basri said, the most pious or muttaqi who complete his wajibat. Do not miss your wajibat.
Excellent. Finally, Sheikh Bilal.
So Surah Zumar, verse number 53. Allah says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. This verse, sometimes we find ourselves kind of falling into despair when we take a look at what do we want to be and who are we today. And sometimes we take a look at the compromises we make in life and we feel bad about ourselves and we feel like giving up. This is a verse that I repeat to myself often, and I find that it's always important to repeat to people, especially in our process of growth and as we continue to grow. Allah says, O worshipper of Allah, O servant of Allah, La taqnatu min rahmatillah. Don't lose hope in the mercy of Allah. And that's a really important point, that we always remember that we should have hope in the mercy of Allah and that Allah is merciful and He can forgive everything. Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. Allah can forgive all of the sins. Allah forgives all of the sins. And that's the second point, is that always remember to seek istighfar. Don't delay a moment. Don't delay a second. Any opportunity you have, seek istighfar of Allah. Seek the forgiveness of Allah. Always ask Him that let this be the moment that I become a better person. Let this be the moment that I never repeat a mistake that I've made. Let this be the moment that I am the best person that you want me to see. And that process will always give you hope and move you forward, and will help you and give you the hope that you need to keep changing and keep improving, and knowing that you're not the same person you were yesterday. Every time you think about Allah's mercy, every time you seek His forgiveness, you're a better person. And that's the best that we can do with life, is keep moving forward and keep trying to make every day, every moment better than the moment before. That's all I got.
Excellent. So apologize to everybody. You know, we couldn't finish all of the questions. Alhamdulillah, we had quite a bit of questions on the Slido as well as the Google Forms. And, you know, I think we can set up another session, you know, and I guess I can get in touch with somebody to see if everybody's open to another session. I think we peaked out on the participants right at about 168, which is excellent as well. This session is being recorded, so we can potentially pass the link around once we review it and go through the publishing process, so that people would like to know more about it or go back and listen to various answers. They can certainly do so. Other than that, I hope everybody has a good night. Khuda Hafiz.
Well, thank you again for moderating. We all appreciated your helping us out.
The participants, and especially all the scholars, Brother Salman, Brother Rizwan, and Sheikh Lal, and
Ahsantum.
really Brother Muslim. All of you really contributed well. You gave your valuable time, and all people are alhamdulillah great reward. I just mentioned for the scholars one last thing, and I was reading one riwayat from Bibi Fatima Zahra. Someone came and asked question from her, and after a while she feel like tired to ask more question, and she think there is more questions left. So she said, ask more questions. I feel I don't want to make you tired. And she said, when I answer one question is more valuable than if earth and sky filled with the pearl, value of the pearl is less than whatever reward I get. So inshallah, Allah give you reward like that, because you all give you valuable time based on your knowledge. Alhamdulillah, Allah accept from all of us and make us among the true believers of Allah.
Inshallah.
Ahsantum.
Jazakumullah.
مع السلامة في أمان الله. مع السلامة.
السلام عليك حجة الله في أرضه السلام عليك يا عين الله في خلقه السلام عليك يا نور الله الذي يهتدي به المهتدون ويفرج به عن المؤمنين السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخائف السلام عليك أيها الغني الناصر السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخائف السلام عليك أيها الغني الناصر السلام عليك يا سفينة النجاة السلام عليك يا أين الحياة يا أين
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيتم وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين